Hello and welcome to the President's Podcast right here on The Record with the Ohio Senate. The views the news excludes. I'm John Fortney, the Director of Communication with the Senate Republican Caucus, the Majority Caucus in the Ohio Senate. We haven't had the President on the President's Podcast for a couple weeks. Matt Huffman joins us, a Republican from Lima. Great to have you back on the program.
Nice to be back, John. And I think I was ably substituted for with some great senators, but it's good to be back.
Yeah, Senator McCauley, Senator Serino, they did a great job. Had not happened in 20 years. Your thoughts of being part of the special session that the governor called regarding putting Joe Biden on the ballot and outlawing foreign contributions to ballot initiatives?
Yeah, well, I think it was, the governor sort of, hey, we need to answer these questions. Now, procedurally, it was, I guess, interesting for a guy like me who's interested in constitutions and what they say. The substance of the question remained the same as the couple of bills that we sent to the House. But I'm glad that it got done. I'm glad that the House decided to take it on and pass bills or make decisions, I guess, regarding both the foreign national spending and the we say putting Biden on the ballot, but it really is about major parties. That's what the language is in the bill. Basically
relaxing the deadline so the Democratic National Committee could meet the deadline to officially put him on the ballot. Were you surprised that the governor actually called a special session? Because when he had his news conference that day, about 3 weeks ago, he said that the failure to act by the House was simply unacceptable, also called it ridiculous and, quote, absurd. Were you surprised that the governor decided that he needed to exercise his constitutional powers? Because the Senate had passed many bills, I think 3, that addressed the foreign donations, correct, to ballot campaigns, but also did the same thing, relaxing the deadline for the DNC.
Yeah, no, I guess I know that the governor's very frustrated with that. Yeah, I think he's frustrated with the lack of action on the marijuana thing also. But those were 2 issues that were timely. And so I'm not surprised that he did it, because he's expressed to me and to lots of other folks in the Senate side how frustrated he was.
He put out a statement after the Tuesday session where the Senate acted, saying, "I congratulate the Ohio Senate on passing a bill to put both President Biden on the November ballot, as well as taking strong action to ban foreign contributions in Ohio campaigns. They are both the right thing to do." He goes on to say, "I have been taken aback by how many officials and special interest groups have come out against efforts to ban potential foreign support for ballot initiatives. A foreign contribution ban is needed in Ohio right away to protect the integrity of the Ohio Constitution, our November election, and all future elections. It's the right thing to do." When the governor was taken aback by how often we're seeing foreign donations play out or play a part in our Constitution, he made it very clear that it was time for the legislature to act, and the Senate again went first.
Yeah, I was mentioning this to a couple of folks, and they kind of long-time State House actors, and there was a time when folks said, here's a fundamental issue. Yeah, maybe it doesn't benefit me, or maybe it does, and this is one of those fundamental issues. Of course, we don't want people from foreign countries, fill in the blank with what your least favorite or favorite foreign country, affecting elections in Ohio. I don't even like it that people from outside the state of Ohio can contribute money, but that's a constitutional First Amendment question in the United States. So this is a very fundamental issue, and frankly, the Democrats who voted against this several times stated publicly, well, I'm not for it either, but I'm not going to vote for this ban. So it was ridiculous that it wasn't happening, and I'm glad it did.
Well, they also said it just wasn't happening, that it's not really happening, but then they contradicted themselves later in the week by saying, well, the Republicans, what they want to do is they just want to make sure they keep all those foreign dollars out of the upcoming redistricting campaign to repeal the will of more than 70% of the voters. So which is it? They said it wasn't happening, but we have the FEC memo from December 2023 that we showed on our last podcast with, I think, Senator McCauley. And the fifth recommendation from the Federal Elections Commission is amend the foreign national prohibition to include state and local ballot initiatives, referenda, and recall elections. So it's pretty clear that even the Federal Elections Commission says, states, you need to have this in your revised code. It needs to be law.
Yeah, yeah. It's really frustrating when there's a very fundamental thing like that, and folks just won't do it for a particular advantage. But, with the governor's help, we were able to get everything passed. Now, and when I say everything, that's probably not truly accurate, because the bill wasn't as strong ultimately as the bill that we first passed and sent over there. So I think there's some cleanup that needs to be done to that.
Yeah, that we sent several different versions of Senate Bill 215 into House bills. It's been very interesting, though, to now watch the fallout coming from the special interest groups that represent a lot of these D.C. progressive leftist organizations like the 1630 Fund, which is funded by $220 million from the Swiss billionaire Hans-Jörg Weiss. This is a quote from Cleveland.com from Andrew Tobias here this past week. Says, this is from Colin Marazzi, the Deputy Policy Director with the ACLU of Ohio. Says, quote, I'm sure a lot of people are talking with their legal counsels to determine what their best course of action is, said Colin Marazzi, the Deputy Director of ACLU of Ohio. An organization that's been allied with the 1630 Fund on Ohio ballot issues, and which also may end up suing to try to block the law. Quote, are they going to have to completely restructure their organization? That's a question that's going to be answered on a case-by-case basis. Continuing, Chris Melody Fields, Executive Director of the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center, a liberal organization in Washington, D.C., that helped pass the abortion rights measure in Ohio last year, said, quote, what I know about groups in state is that they are very, very committed to making sure that direct democracy and ballot measures are a part of Ohio. Legislating by constitutional amendment and the power grab that now has been limited because their foreign donations, their foreign election interference, and their foreign campaign donors are facing a state law that will make it much harder, and they could be prosecuted.
Yeah, well, I think, our job is not to make sure that people in foreign countries can affect our elections. That's not direct democracy. None of the folks who live in foreign countries are people who are citizens of the state of Ohio. That's who direct democracy is for. And of course, we do not have a direct democracy form of government. We don't have 11.1 million people stand up on a hill like they did in ancient Greece and everybody raises their hand. We have a Republican system, Republican with a small r, just like every other state. In fact, the United States Constitution says that the federal government shall guarantee a Republican form of government in all of the states. So these exceptions that we have, ballot initiatives and referenda and things like that, those are things that are certainly allowed, but you still have to follow, the law regarding those. And I would also say that, we're not here to make sure that special interest groups get what they want. Special interest groups, which, lots of groups like the Farm Bureau, they're a special interest group. They're not trying to put stuff on the ballot usually, but they can participate, the ACLU and everybody else, in the process just like everyone else. Bring it to their legislature.
Right, and that's the form of government that there are hearings in committees, and the public can actually come testify.
Right, that's right, and the ACLU can, and we've passed bills that the ACLU has endorsed. We could list a stream of those, but apparently the ACLU wants everything they have passed, so or expects it. I guess everybody wants everything, but that's just not realistic expectation.
Continuing on with this is along the narrative of, it just doesn't happen. Foreign donors, it's just not happening. Well, the same story goes on to say the 1630 Fund has given another $500,000 to a redistricting reform measure that would replace the Ohio Redistricting Commission. So again, It's happening. Another 500,000. Citizens Not Politicians, the group backing the redistricting measure, hasn't said how it thinks the change will affect the work. Quote from Maureen O'Connor, the former Chief Justice who is now the face of this campaign by progressive leftists. Quote, they would like to talk about anything but the real issue, which is gerrymandering, Maureen O'Connor said. Well, the real issue is gerrymandering results for progressive left candidates based on percentages, which is what she lobbied for during the whole original case.
Right, and remember, too, that we put ballot initiatives on to put specific rules on this in 2015 and 18. That's passed. That system works. It allowed a unanimous vote by bipartisan folks. What this provision does that Maureen O'Connor is talking about is it basically says we are going to gerrymander based on political party, the truest form of gerrymandering. You want to vote no on gerrymandering? Vote no on this issue, because that's exactly what it is. It doesn't take into account communities, population, a whole number of other things. So, and I don't think that Maureen O'Connor or anybody else is for it can defend that. They can go around and do press conferences and things like that and say only what they want, but in a real argument, it's indefensible.
Well, it is indefensible, especially when you're relying on donations from foreign donors. It's really, un-American to an extent. Why would you allow foreign election interference and campaign on dollars coming from outside the country, especially as a former high-up elected official in Ohio? Bill Seitz had a good floor speech when they passed their version, House Bill 1 of this. He said, referring to the ballot amendment, Citizens Not Politicians and Maureen O'Connor, he said, quote, if it's such a damn good idea by Ms. O'Connor to ruin our election system with a convoluted process that would make Rube Goldberg proud, if it's such a good idea, let her get the money from Ohio and U.S.-based interests and not foreign nationals. He definitely knew what was going on.
Sure. Well, he's a poet, of course, and I don't think he even writes that down. He just stands up and says it. So he'll be missed when he leaves the House.
And
sure.
we've shown you the flow chart, the spreadsheet, the 64 different options of the flow chart that he referred to, the Rube Goldberg version of Citizens Not Politicians, and how ambiguous and deep into the weeds it is, all for fixed outcomes for progressive leftists. They're sticking with the redistricting topic. Last Friday, there was a story that came out right ahead of the special election for the 6th District congressional race, which Senator Ruley won, our member, and a story in Gongwer and a couple other legacy media outlets quoted David Niven. They held a news conference, but it was a rally to try to campaign for the Democratic candidate up there. David Niven is an American politics professor at the University of Cincinnati. He used to write speeches for former Democrat Governor Ted Strickland. He was quoted in this story. The topic is District Boundaries Criticized Ahead of Special Election, Congressional District Boundaries. Quote, the 6th District is actually built on adversarial economic interests. It's built on an incongruent culture, and it's built on divided geography, he said, quote, and it is therefore really a massive impediment to good representation. I'm from the 6th District. This is simply a perfect example of today's culture of condescension coming from the ivory towers of academia. The League of Women Voters was there. Jen Miller, who heads the organization, says, quote, we've been working on gerrymandering here in Ohio for well over 5 decades. We fought both Republicans and Democrats in Ohio and nationally against gerrymandering. Why? Because it harms everyone. I was kind of surprised to hear that part about fighting against gerrymandering when they support the so-called citizens, not politicians redistricting issue.
Yeah, I mean, it really is gerrymandering. The interesting part is what David Niven is criticizing in this election. What he says are the division of communities, which is in the Constitution as it relates to the General Assembly and Congress. All of these rules, that's all going to go away with this ballot initiative in November if it passes. Now, I don't know if David Niven is going to be criticizing the ballot initiative because it takes away the communities of interest and you can't split up local cities, et cetera. But he should address that. And because if that's truly the way he feels, he should be against this also.
That's right. And I'm going to point out basically the hypocrisy of this and how they contradict themselves in this story. Gongwer reached out to me, and I responded very heavily, very directly, heavy-handedly. I said, Senate GOP spokesman John Fortney, meantime, questioned whether Niven and the league were able to comment objectively on the district and its residents. Quote, Professor Niven and his progressive friends don't remotely represent the people of the 6th District, which have rejected the far-left politics of Joe Biden and Barack Obama, turning the once blue district solid red. I went on to say, the congressional map represents the least splits in modern history, representing compact communities of interest. And then saying, I argued that the ballot issue campaign backers wanted to, quote, dismantle into unrecognizable districts, all for gerrymandered political power at the expense of the hardworking Ohioans of the 6th District. I mean, they hold a news conference, obviously, to try to undermine a Republican candidate running for Congress, say it's not representative of the district, but they're lying through their teeth because clearly the politics of decades now of Joe Biden and Barack Obama and far left, the union groups, the blue collar workers have said enough is enough. We're voting Republican. So that whole compact area, they just don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I think they do know what they're talking about, John. I think that this is all part of the same script. We were going to say the same things over and over. I mean, these were things that Jen Miller was saying 10 years ago, and we sculpted a solution and put it in the Constitution with the support of both parties and all of these interest groups that you're talking about. The problem is, well, now that we've got that, we're going to throw that out for something that will essentially eliminate most of the moderates in the Democratic Party. And this is designed, which, by the way, it's the same people who designed the Wisconsin map. The Wisconsin map took 64 state House Republicans and paired them together. So there were 32 races where two incumbents were running against each other. That's what they intend to do with this.
Yes, and I'll wrap this up by saying this is how nonsensical these quotes are, and they actually do believe, if they say them enough, that people will start believing it or that it'll turn into fact. Professor Niven went on to say, the energy industry has an interest in the profits of the energy industry. Manufacturing has the exact opposite interest. They have an interest in efficiency, reducing the use of fossil fuels, saying that there's the energy industry and manufacturing in that district, and they don't have anything in common. Really, have you ever heard of vertical integration? Ask people in oil and gas if they have anything in common with the manufacturing industry. And then he went on to say there's no reason why the people of Washington County and Mahoning County, who do not see eye to eye, who are of different economies and different cultures in literally tangible ways, need to be in the same district. Clearly, he's never set foot in really any of that area. For anybody to say Washington County, where I'm from, and Mahoning County, and the people don't see eye to eye, that's outrageous.
Well, it's especially interesting and outrageous because we are on a regular basis presented with suggestions about programs for Appalachia. In Appalachia are 32 counties that run, I think, from Claremont County all the way to Ashtabula County, essentially along the river and most of southeast and south central Ohio. So those two counties, which I think maybe are separated by 2 or 3 counties, right? Yeah. Maybe Jefferson's in there and a couple more between Mahoning County. I think Columbiana would be in there too. But I mean, I'm sure there's 2 sisters, one who lives in Washington County and one who lives in Mahoning County, and lots of other people. So.
Right. It was dripping with condescension coming from Tenure Island, but that's truly, you put your finger on it. They think if they say it enough that they'll craft a narrative that people will start believing.
Well, to the extent that people are reading that and trying to make some sense of it, which I'm not sure how many people are, the folks who are reading it are going to go, "What do you mean that we don't have anything in
Oil and
common.
gas and manufacturing doesn't have anything in common, really? That'd be, you could take that to your business course at Marietta College. You might get a different opinion. Education, obviously, a big part of what the Ohio Senate addresses, and an extra $1 billion went to public schools in the current budget, and also a revision and expansion of the Ed Choice campaign, and it's starting to get some headlines. And there was a story in the Dayton Daily News right here. So the headline is, Ohio spent nearly $1 billion on private school vouchers. Who did they benefit? And the narrative is trying to undermine the Ed Choice scholarship program. And it says it is largely subsidizing families already sending their kids to private schools. How terrible. Goodness. I mean, if you're a family and you're already enrolled, it's a good thing if you can take advantage of the expansion of a program, and then more people will get involved as well. They treat this like this is a terrible negative story and it's not working, but I'm thinking actually this is a good thing.
Yeah, it is a good thing, and I don't know that it's completely accurate because they're using, in this case, words like largely. A couple reporters used the word mostly. I don't know how many percent of people are in that category, but remember, a lot of the folks who were in these schools and trying to pay tuition were monies that they were borrowing, sometimes borrowing from relatives, or they would go to a private school for as long as they could afford it, especially in the younger grades. But when it gets to high school, they can't afford because the high school tuition is so much greater. So the main point, and also when some of these extra assets come into these schools, they can begin affording a broader set of services to students who otherwise may not be able to go to that school because the services aren't there. So what we're really trying to say here is, look, we need to have alternatives and choices. And like any marketplace, the more choices you have, the better the service and the less the prices. Of course, for every student who takes a scholarship and goes to a private school, it saves the state about $7,000.
Yeah, when the average per pupil cost average is what, a little over $14,000 now?
Right.
For Ohio public schools.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that, in the end, most folks who are making decisions should realize that this issue is one of those issues where 70 to 80% of the people say, yeah, I think there should be school choice. Now, there's a very strong, probably the strongest lobby in the state of Ohio, which is the public teachers, not the teachers, by the way, it's mostly the administrators.
The admin, right.
Who are leading these efforts. And most people are for it, and it's really a very popular program.
Yeah, and
Even popular, and people think it's a good thing, even the people who aren't using it.
Right, and there's plenty of people that are happy with their public schools.
Yeah.
And in fact, Beth Lawson, from School Choice Ohio, said, I feel like more and more people are doing a good job examining what their choices are. And she even said that, there's a lot of people that are happy with their public schools.
Yeah.
But this is a great opportunity for parents who want an option.
Yeah, there's a sort of a large assumption in this about public schools versus private schools. We have 608 school districts. We have about 3,000 buildings. What's going on in a school district like Russia, Ohio, by the way, that's spelled Russia,
It's
but
spelled
that's
Russia,
what I say,
right.
is vastly different than what's happening in the Columbus School District. Those two, that type of education has nothing to do with each other. In towns like Russia and lots of other places around Ohio, it's family-based. The folks in the community know each other. The teachers are known by the parents. The children are held responsible by everybody in the community. That's not true because in many of the bigger school districts, because a lot of these kids have to travel a great distance. They're not neighborhood schools like they used to be. And so we can't put all public schools in one boat. Now, not coincidentally, I don't think it's coincidental, that in schools, districts like Russia, nobody's interested for the most part in using a voucher. Some do, they go over to Sidney Lehman or Holy Angels, someplace like that. But most people in those places, and it's not just in small towns, by the way, they like their school. And even in school districts that have don't have a good report card or whatever it may be, people still want to send their kids there because they went there, it's close to them. the hundreds of reasons why people make choices in the marketplace that can't be put into legislation.
Right, it's the legacy. The coalition that is trying to take down the EdChoice program altogether goes back to the early 90s and the whole school funding lawsuit. And by the way, the school funding formula in Ohio has been constitutional for, 20 years or so. But they want you to think it's not constitutional, even though we put $1 billion into it in the budget. There's a new school funding formula every time the state of Ohio, the legislature, passes a budget. But Bill Phillips said what's happening here is that taxpayers are subsidizing a more wealthy crowd with tax money for vouchers. And I could only think, why are they making parents the enemy here? Because the program is up to 450% of poverty level, which for a family of four is $150,000. And that doesn't go a long way on a family of four for a lot of people in Ohio. And then it's a sliding scale for anybody over that. But really, this coalition and the administrators of the teachers union have really looked at parents and told them, you're the enemy.
Well, one of the questions I had a reporter ask me is that should we be giving scholarships to millionaires, and didn't quite define what that meant. And I think for once the income level gets up pretty high, I think the most that it is like $700. Of course, most private school tuition is far in excess of that. But I guess the point is, the state of Ohio taxpayers are subsidizing, if the child goes to a public school, all of the cost of that. And all of it is much more expensive. We're giving more money to the millionaire kids who go to Upper Arlington and New Albany and Indian Hill and Beechwood and places like that. We're subsidizing all the millionaires. Now, these millionaires who might get a scholarship over here for $780, we're not subsidizing them very much. But all the millionaires who send their kids to public schools, we're subsidizing them fully and a whole lot more money.
Well, also one of the things to think about is it seems like the coalition and Bill Phillips and company and all the progressive leftists don't seem to think that parents that send their children to a private school, a Catholic school through the EdChoice program, they seem to think that they don't pay state taxes.
Well, right. I think
they do.
They pay state taxes, and they also, if they own property, pay their local school taxes. And, most people who own a home, they're paying taxes who are sending their kids to private school. In my case, I support my local public school. I put sign up in my yard for the levy and do all of those things. And I've represented the school in a few legal matters in the past. One famous one regarding a football game that a lot of people remember. It's maybe for another podcast sometime. But the point is that, Bill Phillips and those folks, they're being paid to do a job, which is, it doesn't make any difference what it is. We need to destroy school choice in the state of Ohio. And the problem is, constitutionally it's allowed. The U.S. Supreme Court say that. The Ohio Constitution says that. And the Ohio Constitution specifically says the state of Ohio shall support religious education in the state of Ohio. Not one specific sect, but support religious education. And more importantly, these programs are wildly politically popular among the citizens of the state of Ohio. And some attempt like this to, go to court and take them out and all of that kind of thing is, enough school districts are giving them money to file lawsuits. They're going to get to do that. I think it's a waste of the taxpayers' money for all of these school districts that are pumping money into these lawsuits.
Exactly. And you want to lose elections, anger your parent and
Right.
your parent body,
Right.
At your school district and across the state of Ohio. Big capital budget happening. Won't spend a tremendous amount of time on it. The first phase of it rolled out, called the OTSCIF, affectionately around these parts, in the Ohio Senate and the Ohio General Assembly. The one-time Strategic Community Investment Fund, $700 million total, $350 per chamber, and we rolled out the Senate version this week. How is the overall process as the second phase comes in for a capital budget that will probably be more than $4 billion for community projects around the state?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, these funds are for physical assets. And so we had some people disappointed that they wanted a new program created. Well, these are one-time funds, which means we can't do this and then continue doing it after. So it's for capital items, mostly for permanent real estate improvements or construction and things like that.
Water towers, volunteer fire departments, all kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, you spend $850 million and you get 132 opinions. There's a lot of different things. And so I think the process is going very well. I can't say enough about Chairman Matt Dolan. The logistical work and getting, the opinions of 33 senators. He received and considered 4,400 separate requests and met with all the senators, or almost all of them, to talk about each of these specific items, and did that with a great deal of diligence and acuity. And I'm, we're well served by him. So, it's my hope that we're going to have the second. Or my belief that there's going to be a second bill for the capital budget. But ultimately, it's really just one vote that we're going to take in moving this forward.
Toward the end of June then.
Right, hopefully June 26th, we'll get this done.
Final thought, Senate bill, I think it's 278, addresses some of the marijuana program that was issued to, that was passed last November. Senator Schuring and Senator Steve Huffman does basically three things that's getting some attention. One, it says if you're going to have home grow, you have to sign a document or an affidavit that you're not going to sell it. I equated that much to how you used to have to buy fireworks. You had to sign a document that said, I won't set them off in state. I'll take them out of the state. Also addresses public smoking. Can't smoke in a public place. And moving Delta 8 products into the medical dispensaries. I did see a story today where now communities, 55 and counting around Ohio, have said you can't sell pot here. You cannot have a dispensary here. What's your thoughts on the bill? Are we making progress here? And it seems like communities are already trying to get ahead of this program if they don't want it in town.
Yeah, I think that's, first of all, we need to pass some sort of regulatory measure because the statutory initiative was flawed in a variety of ways. And that's why we worked for the first 30 days after the election in the Senate to pass a regulation bill to deal with the smoking in public, to deal with the taxation, to deal with a whole variety of things. And unfortunately, that too is sitting in the House without any action. This bill was introduced by Senator Schuring in my conversations with him, essentially to get a discussion going, to get these issues resolved. We're going to work again real hard over the next 2 weeks to come up with something. Ultimately, getting this thing under control is going to depend on whether the Speaker is willing to take the bill to the floor.
Ohio Senate President Matt Huffman, Republican from Lyman, thanks for your time. Great to see you.
You bet. Thanks, John.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.